Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is from our good friend of the show, Mr. JGrupe from over on Reddit, No Sleep. Author of Winter Camping with Wendigos, This Is Not a Healing Pool, and The Prisoner of Luna Morte Manor. Of course, as ever though, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. Entitled, I'm a delivery man for monsters. Some customers are worse than demon creatures. Let's get straight into that. Hi, my name is Jay and I'm a delivery guy. No, I don't work for Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes. The place I work for is an old school delivery company. We service the entire town of Hollow's End with pizza, beer, takeout food, cigarettes, just about anything else you can think of within reason. Cash only, no debit or credit cards. We don't use an app or take orders by text or email. The owner of Doc's Delivery Services, well, you guessed it, named Doc. He's an obese, dishevelled, white-haired curmudgeon who never leaves his smoke-filled house and refuses to make any changes to his business plan, despite new advancements in technology or just rational common sense. Rather than communicating via sensible means like text message, we have to wire our cars with these absurd 3'2" antennas. He calls us up on a portable radio to give us our assignments. Then, at the end of the day, we just go to his ramshackle house to settle up with him and collect our fees. Along with the equipment's never changing, our wages never do either. The rest of the crew seems to have accepted that we will forever be a measly $2 per delivery, regardless of the distance being driven, while Doc sits on his ass at home collecting some ungodly sum, which grows larger by the year. So basically, I work for tips, which means the customer is always right and I'm always the asshole. The radio was blaring to life as I sat waiting in the parking lot outside Randy's rotisserie. We've got a lot of calls this time of night to deliver for them, and so it seemed like a good spot to hang out. Jay, watch it 20. The voice on the radio was barely identifiable as a human, but I had been through this enough times that I didn't need to actually hear the words he was saying anymore. It was more about his inflection, primarily how pissed off he sounded. I'm outside Randy's. What's up? Can you drive over to the West End to Mario's Pizza and grab an order? I was all the way on the other side of town, across the bridge. A good 20 minutes. And Mario's had a 30-minute delivery guarantee. But you don't argue with Doc, not unless you wanted to be picking up the shittiest calls imaginable for the next week as his sick form of revenge. Okay, I'm gone. 10-4. Oh, and the order is for Frank, by the way. And with that, the radio went dead. Oh shit. Not Frank. Anybody but Frank again. I really needed to start refusing to go there, like everybody else. But I was more than a little scared of Doc. Last time, I had refused to take a call. He had assigned me to empty his duty for a week. Basically, that meant going to all the worst houses where the dickhead alcoholics live in there paid for their beer, orders with ungodly amounts of empty bottles, and didn't tip a red dime. One building in particular had made me anxious to never disappoint Doc again. A 4-story walk up there where the guy had paid for his 48 bottles of beer with nothing but empties. It took me 12 trips up and down the stairs, and by the end of it, I wanted to die and take the customer with me. My hands were gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled rage as I pulled out of my parking spot and drove through several stop signs, cutting off drivers until eventually arriving at Mario's Pizza in the West End. They had the distinction of being the only pizza place in town that made their pie using potato crust. The pies were 3 times as heavy as normal pieces, and I had trouble carrying the tall stack out of the shop. You got 5 minutes, the owner called after me. Better hurry. Thanks, Mario, I yelled back sarcastically over my shoulder. I got in the old Ford and put the keys into ignition, hopeful for the sound of the engine reluctantly turning over as it struggled. And after several attempts, it eventually started and belched out a cloud of unhealthy-looking black smoke as it backfired, and I began to drive hastily towards Frank's house. I was easily 10 minutes away. I got there in 4. Regardless, I pulled up in front of the house. I knew I was too late. The time had just barely run out, and Frank would be watching the clock very closely, as always. As I hustled up to the door, he opened it wide and I saw the massive, dark silhouette of him tapping his wrist. The interior of the house behind him was likewise pitch black, not a single light in the place. I suppose you could say Frank was nocturnal, or would be if he ever slept at all. His eyes reflected slightly golden, mirror-like, as he stared back at me from the blackness of his abode. "You're late," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. The smell from inside the house, it was terrible. Like old rancid meat and dead bodies, of which they were probably both. I always felt like a scared little kid when I stood in his doorway, looking up at the creature who called himself Frank. And I never, ever went inside, no matter how many times he asked. Now he grabbed the stack of pizzas out of my hands. "Oh, come on, Frank. It's physically impossible for me to get here that fast. I was on the other side of frickin' town." "Not my problem," he said, opening up the pizza box on top and taking out the pie. He folded it with one giant, furry blue hand while holding a stack of 10 boxes with the other. Then he stuffed half of it into his mouth like an oversized taco and began to chew. A few seconds later, he finished off the pizza in one more massive bite and licked his fingers. "Frank, please, I can't afford to pay for all these pieces again. They take them out of my salary. That's my whole day's work." And he pulled out a $5 bill. "Here, I'll give you a tip, at least." He passed it over to me, smeared with orange pizza grease, and then he began to close the door. I turned around and started stomping away angrily when I heard his voice call after me. "Hey, kid." "Yeah?" "I tell you what, I'll give you the money for the pizzas, but you have to make a quick pickup for me. A very special delivery. What you say, Jay?" "Frank, is this what I think it is? There's no way in hell. Literally, no way in. We tried, remember? That escalator was busted to shit. I can't get you, you demon blood." "Not that. Something else. Payment has already been arranged. Delivery is the only problem. The hunter's house." I was beginning to suspect this had been a setup from the start. It probably wasn't even hungry. Frank tore open another pizza box as he waited for my answer, but it was obviously going to be a yes from me. I couldn't afford all that pizza. That was way too much dough. After getting the address from Franklin, I made for the house across town. It was, of course, on the north side of the city, where I had just been. My gas tank was already getting low and I had only filled it up that morning. It was going to be a very bad day, unless I made some decent tips somewhere. Halfway to the address, I saw an old woman walking down the side of the road in her slippers and housecoat. Cars whizzed past as she walked with her frail little steps down a gravel shoulder. Concerned for her, I pulled over and got out, calling after her as I ran along the gravel shoulder, trying to catch up. And despite her advanced age, she was really quick. I looked at the passing cars scornfully. The old woman at the side of the road looked almost exactly like my grandma. I thought to myself, didn't these people have grandmothers? Weren't they worried for this poor woman's safety? She clearly wasn't in her right mind. "Oh, miss, you okay? Are you lost?" I yelled at her, running to catch up as cars sped past. She seemed not to hear me, or pretended not to. I ran in front of her and stopped her, out of breath and panting. She didn't look the least bit tired or concerned. As I took in her face, I recognized her immediately. "Grandma?" "Oh, hi, Jay. Sweetie, how is your day going? What are you doing all the way out here? Where's your nurse?" Her home care nurse was named Tammy, and she had been visiting every day while I was at work, taking care of her since it was just the two of us. My parents had died in an accident many years prior. A drunk driver. A hit and run as well. I never caught the guy. Oh, her? Well, it wasn't Tammy today. It was some other lady. Mean, rude, disrespectful to her elders. She told me I couldn't have my lunchtime bottle of wine. I was tired of her bossing me around. So, when she went to the bathroom, I left. Figured that would teach her. You left? Grandma, you can't be out here like this. You're in your slippers and your robe and it's freezing outside. Come on, hop in the car. I'll take you home. After the wine store, she said, her hands on her hips, unmoving. Sure, come on. We gotta stop and grab something from Franklin first, I said, taking her by the hand and leading her to my still running car. Ooh, I love Franklin. How's he doing? Well, you know Franklin. And she nodded, laughing. I opened the passenger side door for her, helping her to sit down in the low seat. Of course, dear. I know everybody in town. I lived here my whole life. Well, he's fine. He wants me to pick up something from the hunter for him. Food, probably. Some interdimensional delicacy, I'll bet. I got into the driver's seat and pulled the car back onto the road. Huh. So he's the same as always, still tricking poor dim-witted youngsters into doing his dirty work for him. Grandma. I'm sorry, dear, but it's the truth. You really need to start standing up for yourself to that boss of yours. Otherwise, he'll keep walking all over you. Aren't there any new employees? Are you still at the bottom of the seniority ladder? Oh, it's not that simple, Grandma. You don't know what Doc is like. Well, sure I do, she said as we pulled onto Boulder Street, where the hunter lived. We used to go together. After all, he had that delivery company for as long as I can remember, and he's been pulling this sort of thing for even longer. Let me guess, he's still paying $3 a delivery too. I think you're remembering that wrong. It's $2 per delivery. And she looked at me and then shook her head with obvious concern. Oh, Jay. I pulled into the hunter's driveway and got out the car, telling my grandma to wait there. As I approached the front door of the house, it opened and I saw a man in a great workman suit standing there beside a very large cage. He smiled a psychopathic grin, and I saw his pale blue eyes were dancing behind gold-rimmed spectacles. He looked thrilled to have a visitor. Hello, you must be Jay. I've heard a lot about you. Frank says you're the best. Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you, I said, sticking out my hand and feeling strangely annoyed by the compliment for some reason. The cage beside him was black inside, as if it were filled with a cloud of dark smoke. It rattled slightly as I approached. We shook hands and he told me a few precautions as he helped me load the crate into the back seat of the car. And I noticed he was wearing very thick gloves, like a falconer. These things are smart. Don't forget, if you're not paying attention, I don't notice. You've got to watch it like a hawk. I nodded and agreed, absent-mindedly, not really knowing what a thing was or understanding its dangers. Mostly, I just wanted to get this nightmare of a call over with. I figured I'd pass these instructions on to Frank, since they obviously only applied to the creature when it was out of its cage. Little did I know, he was telling me to watch it while it was in the cage. He was giving me instructions for transport. I couldn't help but notice he was glancing at it sideways from the corner of his eye every few seconds as well, as if he didn't trust it. We left the house and started driving again, heading back towards Frank's place. A couple of minutes after leaving there, I looked in a rearview mirror to see the cage door was suddenly hanging wide open. What the? I felt a slippered foot smack the side of my face and the car swerved slightly, but I quickly regained control. And then I looked at the seat next to me and did a double take. My grandma was now clambering over the divide, and her feet were kicking in the air as she struggled to climb over the seat. Grandma, what are you doing? Put your seatbelt back on. Looking over my shoulder, I saw she now had a knife clenched between her teeth and was engaged in a heated battle with some sort of demon squid made of black tendrils like oil mixed with smoke. The cage was knocked over loudly, and the sound of grunts and slaps, kicks and punches could be heard. My heart was racing, and I was preparing to stop the car when suddenly one of the thing's tentacles wrapped around my neck and began to choke me from behind. The car swerved across the lanes again, this time nearly crashing into a truck. I managed to correct and veered back into the proper lane as my vision went yellow, then red, and then black with pinpoint spots, and I started losing consciousness. Hooked barbs on the tentacles dug into my throat, and blood began to drip warm from my neck down my shirt. "Grandma, help!" I rasped in a wheezing, gasping voice. "It's killing me!" And she didn't answer, instead narrowing her eyes and focusing her efforts on wrangling the strange, oily squid creature which had escaped from its cage. Every time I looked in the mirror, it revealed its horrifyingly nude tableau. Black, inky blood sprayed occasionally on me from behind, and the grip on my neck loosened slightly. Then it quickly redoubled its vice-like efforts. I had never felt so terrified before, and not just for me, but for my grandma as well. Strangely, when I looked back in the mirror at her face, she didn't look the least bit concerned. In fact, she appeared to be having the time of her life as she wrestled with a uncaged demon squid attacking her. Her foot was in the thing's face as she wrapped its tentacles around her forearm like a spool of loose cabling being coiled by an expert technician. Then I looked back again to see where she was wrapping the long tendril around itself and winding it around the squid like a ball of yarn being rewound. Then she jammed it back into the cage with one hand, and finally she focused on attacking the stray tentacle, which was strangling me and shredding my throat like a block of cheddar on a cheese grater with its oily barbs. Eventually, it released its grip on me, and I found I could actually breathe again. I pulled over and slammed on the brakes. As the car came to a stop, I looked back to see the cage door was now closed again, and she was dusting her hands off triumphantly. "Grandma, what is that thing? And how the hell did you do that?" "Demon squid, Jay. And what's your language? I guess Frank found a loophole for his recipe. It might taste a bit fishy, but it should still do the trick." "But what? How? Where did you learn how to fight a monster like that? I could have used your help out here like a bunch of times with those skills." "Well, maybe you should just have to take your old gran out for delivery duty more often. I can probably teach you a thing or two. I used to work for Doc, after all, before we started dating." I felt like there was something she wasn't telling me still, but when I asked her, she wasn't forthcoming with any more answers. I'd have to press her for more details later on, after her lunchtime wine. Now we got back on the road and started driving again, my grandma now in the back seat, watching the cage closely. And finally, we arrived at Frank's house again, and I got out, going around to the back door of the car to grab the crate. Pulling the cage from the back seat, I carried it to the front door as Franklin stood waiting, tapping his foot. "You know, Frank, next time you need a favor, you can ask somebody else. A bit of a warning about the demon squid next time. It would have been great." He snatched the cage from my hands with such force, I was nearly thrown from my feet. "Nice job, kid. You did good. I have some friends who could use your help too. I'll tell Doc to send you exclusively from now on when I need special assistance." Groaning, I tried to object, but he quickly stuffed a thick wad of cash in my front shirt pocket and slammed the door just as I opened my mouth to say, "Please, no, please, 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 for the love of God, no." But it was too late. At least the pile of cash in my pocket felt heavy enough to console me momentarily as I pulled it out and began to count, walking back to my car. Maybe it wouldn't be such a terrible day after all, at least financially speaking. Arriving back at the car, I got in. The back seat was covered with black oil and blood that didn't look like it would come out very easily. And it smelled like a fisherman's wharf during a heat wave. The radio crackled to life and I heard Doc's garbled, condescending voice again. "Jay, what in the hell are you doing over there? You've been on that call for an hour and a half. I need you in the North End. The Count is calling for his nightly O negative. Head over to Discount Drink Emporium, pronto." "All right. my grandma said excitedly, as I tried to start the old beast again. "I love the Count. You'll have to take me with you, so I can say hi." After several turns of the key, the engine coughed and sputtered, and then it started up, and the car began to purr, like a laryngitic old house cat, once again. I'm a delivery man for monsters. The forest is full of terrors. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. Hey, it's Jay the Monster Delivery Man again here. I decided to do a bit more of an update, since there's been a few changes around here recently. First of all, my beloved badass grandma has become my new delivery partner and navigator, per some of your very helpful suggestions. She seems to know this town better than anybody, and that includes a few shortcuts and detours that I didn't even know existed, and some that I prefer to forget about forever, lest they do permanent psychological damage to me. Also, she managed to convince Doc to pay me an additional $1 per delivery, which she has claimed as her fee, for wine money, of course. And so, basically, I'm back where I started, still making $2 per call, but at least I've got some company now, and we're saving on home care nursing fees. The new lady really wasn't cutting it anyways. I found her asleep on the couch after Grandma escaped last time, with empty cans of Chef Boyardee laying around all over the house. She said she'd fallen asleep after hunting for her for hours, but it looked to me like the only thing she'd been hunting for was a can opener. The radio blared to life again, and we got our first call of the afternoon. It had been a quiet one so far, and Grandma had her feet up on the dashboard and was taking a little snooze while I played Grand Theft Auto on my Nintendo DS. The old school overhead version was always my favourite, even though I loved the new first-person GTA games as well. I just had to remind myself the game was over when I stopped playing and started driving in real life. My grandma woke up with a start halfway through a snore. I let her take the call, since she'd always enjoyed busting Doc's balls. And she was way better at negotiating with him than I was. "Jay, you there?" The stackety voice over the airwaves demanded. "Come in, Jay." "Muriel here," my grandma said into the receiver, picking it up a second after waking without missing a beat. She was like a cat. I remember thinking to myself, not for the first time, she would be asleep 1 second and then staring up hell the next. "Muriel, put Jay on, will you?" "Nice try, Doc. What's the call?" I heard the sound of the owner sign into the other end of the radio and took that as an internal victory. "All right, this is a rough one. I'm not gonna lie." I couldn't believe he was actually leveling with me for once, or rather, with my grandma, and I braced myself to hear what the job would be. "You know the deal, Doc. Danger pays for dangerous jobs." Again, I was at a loss. I had never heard of this stipulation. It made sense, but Doc was never one to abide by common sense. "Fine," he said back, and I could tell it was through gritted teeth. 50 for both of you, to split." "Each?" "Deal." I had to catch my breath. $50 for one call? Each? "Okay, go ahead and give me the deets," my grandma said, pulling out a pen and a small notepad from her bra. She handed me the radio receiver so she could write. 3222 Fairbank Street. There's a pair of brothers who run a homebrew operation. I need you to pick up a barrel of something from them." "Oh, the Bimbley brothers. Okay, sure. I know the place." "I need you to take the barrel over to the house in the forest. The subterraneans are doing their annual ceremony tonight." My grandma's hand started to shake slightly. She paused mid-sentence and stopped what she was writing to look at the receiver as if it had just called her a dirty word. I'm sorry, Doc. Did you just say the subterraneans?" And there was no answer for a few long seconds, and then Doc spoke again.
100 each.
2. deal?" She put down her pen and didn't write anything else.
"You owe me, Doc, and my grandson. You would have tried to get him to do this for a couple of bucks, huh? You really are an asshole."
Well, the radio remained silent for a few more long seconds, and I half expected him to fire both of us. But what he did instead surprised me more than anything else he could have said. "I'm sorry."
"What was that, Doc?"
she asked, picking up the receiver and gripping it tightly in her fist.
"Sorry,"
he grumbled.
"All right, Doc. I'll take that, since I know you're not very good with apologies. But you better keep in mind who's riding shotgun here from now on. Okay? We'll call you when it's done."
With that, the radio went dead silent, and I stared at my grandma with wide eyes full of amazement. "Grandma, how the hell did you just do that?" She just smiled and laughed.
"You've got to learn to know your worth, Jay. Remember, not everybody can do this job. You have a driver's license and a working vehicle. Not to mention, you know how to get around Hollow's End. You'll be surprised how much he actually values your services."
This was all a total revelation to me. But hey, I'd take it as a life lesson. "All right, what exactly did we get ourselves into, Grandma? You look more scared than I'd ever seen when you said where we were going."
"I'll explain on the way. Come on, we don't want to keep the subterraneans waiting."
Just that name was enough to send shivers down my spine, but I tried not to think about it too much. The idea of being underground or in a cave would terrify me. I'd always had claustrophobia for as long as I could remember. Something in my memory banks always stirred uncomfortably at the mere mention of such things as being buried alive or exploring underground caverns. But I could never put my finger on what that traumatic memory from my past was. Like it was just on the tip of my tongue, but never attainable. I could only picture darkness and the wet, underground smell of a cave somewhere, and it filled me with dread. I resolved to ask my grandma about it later, since she seemed to know a little bit about everything. If something horrible had happened to me underground as a kid, she would remember. I started up the old car, and it began to rattle, groan, and rumble to life. Pulling out the parking spot, I began driving quickly to my destination on Fairbank Street. It wasn't far, but I had no idea what a house in a forest would be, or how we would get there to deliver a shipment. Maybe my grandma had an idea, though.
"You know this town has a lot of history, right, Jay?"
Sure. I guess so.
"And you know that our town isn't like other towns. You understand that, right?"
It annoyed me that she was talking to me in this way, as if I was a kid or something. Yeah, I wasn't the sharpest person in the drawer, but I understood that our town was different. Then again, I had never stepped outside of it, and so I didn't really know for sure how different. "Of course, I watch movies and TV shows, Grandma, and I've talked to people who moved here from other places. I know this town is different. I know that some of the people who live here aren't exactly normal. Frank, for example. There aren't many places that could attest to having an 8-foot tall, furry blue monster for a citizen. And then there's the Count, the sisters, and of course, Mr. Butcher. Not to mention all of the others, some of whom I'm sure I haven't met, since everybody's so damn secretive around here all the time. But I've never heard of the subterraneans. Who are they?" We pulled onto Fairbank Street, and my grandma pointed towards a house up ahead on the right.
"You haven't heard about them for a reason. We don't talk about the subterraneans unless we have to. It's a bad omen if you have to speak of the people who live beneath the ground and take children in the night. I'll tell you more after we grab the barrel."
We pulled into the perfectly paved driveway on Fairbank Street. The house it belonged to was likewise immaculate, surrounded by stone fences and cobblestone walkways, perfectly tended gardens, and a fine arched gate, high and covered with embellishments, which led to the backyard. A pair of men who looked almost identical came outside. They were both approximately 4 foot tall and had long white beards with no mustaches. Tall hats with floppy ends like elongated toques sat atop their heads, and their clothes were colourful pastels of green, yellows, and reds. "Hello," said the shorter, fatter one on the left. "I'm Nickel Bimbley. This is my brother Pickle Bimbley. We're the Bimbley brothers." They both bowed low, and then the taller, slimmer one dressed mostly in green spoke. "You must be Jay. The barrel is down in the cellar. Come on this way to see if it meets the specifications. Then we'll bring it up for you." And quickly they were off, leading us around the side of the house, through the gate, opening up a screen door, and then a wooden one behind it, and then they led us down a set of stairs, and then down another set into a stone-lined cellar. Well, the air was surprisingly dry, but cool. Well, it was very dark down there. One of the brothers lit a kerosene lamp, holding it up in his hand, and a room full of huge wooden barrels came into focus in the flickering light. One barrel stood in the centre, set away from the rest, and there was a skull and crossbones painted on it in red. "You know, there's not many folks who would do business with the subterraneans," my grandma said with a hint of condemnation in her voice. The two brothers looked at each other for a moment, passing a secretive glance between them. "We do what we have to get by these days. Times are tough. You know that better than anyone, Muriel. On the bright side, I see you're out of retirement. Nice to have you back." "Just temporarily. I'm teaching my grandson Jay here the ropes." "That's good," put in Nickel. "Last thing we need is another delivery guy getting turned into worm food." "Huh? What was that?" I asked. But they ignored me and started bringing the barrel up the stairs. I ran ahead and opened the door for them as the two strong, squat men lifted a giant keg with ease. They put it into the back of the car, and it sat upright, a good 3 feet higher than the clearance I needed to close the trunk. "Do we need some ropes or something to tie it down?" I asked, eyeing the giant keg nervously. "It's not going anywhere," Pickle said, dusting off his hands. "Trust me." My grandma and I got back into the car quickly, and I followed her lead. She seemed to be in a tremendous hurry. I had always noticed she was really fast and never seemed to stop moving, except to sleep. Or maybe it had been from her time working as a delivery driver that she had obtained that habit. "All right," she said as I started the old car. "You know the forest over by the old elementary school, off Elm Drive?" "Yeah, for sure. I used to play in that forest when I was a kid," I replied, driving in that direction. She looked slightly nervous when I said that and was suspiciously quiet for a while afterwards. "So, what's the deal with these subterraneans, anyways?" Reluctantly, she started talking again. "Well, they live underground for one thing, and they've been doing that since time out of mind. The tunnels down there, from what I've seen and heard, they are carved with hieroglyphics, like the ancient Egyptians used to make. It's somewhat of a mystery how long exactly the secret society has been operating for." It was ominous and quiet in the car for a few seconds, and I turned on the radio to a rock station. Highway to Hell played in the background as I thought about whether my life was worth $200 minus gas and expenses. What about the whole worm food remark? What did that mean? "Oh, that! Well, the subterraneans worship these giant super-intelligent millipedes that live underground with them, beneath the forest. There's one in particular that they call the many-legged god. It's all very mysterious. And for all we know, the millipedes made the tunnels, not the people." And finally, we arrived at the forest, and my grandma instructed me to hop the curb and drive towards the edge of the forest. Despite the time of day, it looked dark past the tree line, and almost pitch black the further in we planned to go. "Okay, listen closely, Jay. You see those two trees? The ones with the bark missing from their branches? Drive between them." It sounded bizarre, as if she was telling me to drive straight into a dead end, but I did what she told me. As soon as we were through, she pointed left, and I was surprised to see 2 more trees, with branches missing bark, leading the way through the dense forest. Going between them, she pointed sharply to the right, and I found that way was clear as well. Despite how it looked from the road, there was a path through the trees and into the heart of the forest. You just needed a guide to show it to you. We veered through the trees for a good 20 minutes until we eventually arrived at a dilapidated old house. Despite the dense forest, someone had built a dwelling for themselves out here, and a substantial one at that. It looked like an ordinary house that you would see on the side of any city street, aside from the fact that it was a bit weathered and in need of maintenance, the roof in particular sagging in at the centre. "Get as close as you can. We don't want to have to carry this thing," my grandma said, pointing away through some shrubbery that allowed us to get right up next to the garage door. "Now what?" I asked, turning off the car. "Now we wait." It wasn't long, though, before someone greeted us. The garage door rose up and a pair of men in vermilion hooded robes were standing just inside, looking at us silently. We got out the car and stood looking back at them. I waited to see what my grandma would do, but even she looked nervous all of a sudden, and that made me feel downright terrified. Still, I managed to say something, feeling awkward in the lingering silence. Did you guys order a barrel of something from the Bimbley brothers?" They both nodded in unison, no words. Instead, they lifted their arms, inviting us into the garage. It was dark in there, empty and filled with spiderwebs. "It's right back here. You guys can grab it," I said, leading them to the trunk, or trying to. They just stood where they were, unmoving, their hands tucked into their robes on each opposing arm. My grandma started walking back to the trunk. "Come on, Jay. We are going to have to do this ourselves. Trust me, we don't want to take our time out here. We need to be in and out." She looked at her watch again, and I wondered why she was so concerned with the time all of a sudden. Then I remembered her comment about being in a forest after sunset. I got early these days, in mid-December. We didn't have a lot of time despite the fact that it was an early afternoon delivery. The trees made it difficult to see the position of the sun, but I guessed it would get dark quickly out in these woods. Surprisingly, despite her age, my grandma was pretty damn strong. I helped her lift the big keg with a tremendous effort, and we walked it slowly into the garage, taking several rests along the way to flex her aching fingers. I felt bad for my grandma, but she looked more worried about me. We set it down just inside the door, finally getting it to its destination, and then turned around and got ready to get the hell out of there. When the 2 men in robes were just behind us, when we turned around, and I jumped backwards in surprise. Nan held firm though, just looking up at them fearlessly. "That'll be 400 plus delivery, plus Stokes' fee. Makes it at even 600. I'm assuming you already arranged payments with the brothers, since they didn't ask us for anything." Both of them stood there silently in their dark, hooded robes, staring at us. One looked at the other and nodded. He produced a thick wad of bills and handed it over to her with a gnarled, flame-scarred hand. My grandma took the cash, her own hand trembling ever so slightly as she did so. Then we slipped past them as they turned in unison to watch us go. Without them even having spoken a word, the deal was done, and we got back into the car. The 2 men stood in the garage and hit the button for the automatic door to close. And as it did, I saw the entire floor of the garage drop out, like an elevator, and they descended out of sight, and with the barrel just as the door closed completely. "Whoa, that was some creepy-ass secret society shit right there." Her hands were shaking in the seat next to me. She was looking at me with fear in her eyes. "We need to go now." Okay, no problem. I'll just turn around and..." I looked to see there was now a large tree blocking the path we had taken to get in. A group of people had clearly dragged it over there while we were busy moving a barrel, since upon inspection it was too large to be moved by just the two of us.
I should have trusted my instincts. Got cocky, got sloppy, stupid, Muriel.
My grandma was saying to herself, slapping her cheeks like a fighter getting ready for a brawl. Oh, it's okay, Grandma. We'll just walk back. We'll bring a chainsaw tomorrow or something. It's no big deal. I know we can't ask them for help. That's for sure. Looking around, I saw there were more of the vermilion robed figures standing all around us in the woods, hiding here and there and everywhere, watching us.
Well, we can't stay here, that's for sure,
Nan said, looking at her watch.
I think you're right, Jason. Let's get a move on. We'll come back for the car in the morning, with backup. The important thing is getting out of this forest before sunset.
We didn't have much daylight left, so we took off on foot, the hooded subterraneans watching us silently from all around. Will they hurt us?
Not directly, but they can definitely stall us and try to keep us out here.
What happens after that? And she shook her head as if to say, you don't want to know. When she said that, I couldn't help but think of the brothers' worm food remark. It was going to be a long walk back to town, and despite our best efforts, we would not be able to make it out before dark. I knew that even then. We walked past the crowd of hooded figures in robes, stepping over the tree they had used to block our way out. Their hooded visages were bathed in shadow, and their gazes followed after us, and they began to make a collective noise amongst themselves, which sounded like the chittering of a bug. Then suddenly I heard the sound of something moving beneath the ground, nearby and just below my feet. The leaves rustled and stirred as something with mandibles and a large black insectile face began to emerge, and behind it, one hideous row of legs after another. More of the creature began to emerge from nearby also, and I heard myself scream as my grandma took my hand and pulled me away, heading in the direction of the forest entrance, far off in the distance. The two of us picked up our pace and began to run. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff from the incredible mind of JGrupe over on Reddit No Sleep. As I mentioned last week, Jordan has a brand new book out, available over on Amazon Bookstore. I'll leave the link to that in the description box below this video. Possibly one of the busiest writers over on Reddit and a good friend of the channel. Of course, as ever guys, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help both the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. Now, if you're an aspiring writer and want to get in touch with myself at the brand new contact email, which is, as on screen, contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.